Hello there and welcome back. I'm Leila Barker for Lucky Break Consulting, and this is, of course, Brick House Branding. We are continuing our journey through Module 4, which is all about creating compelling brand visuals. And in this lesson in particular, we're going to turn our focus to fonts and colors that will surround and support your brand. Here's what I have on the agenda. We're going to explore how colors affect brand recall and perception. I'll share some strategies for choosing colors that tap into innate psychology. We'll detail the differences between many different color systems. I'll give you some considerations to keep in mind when selecting fonts for your visual identity, and then I'm going to make you pinky swear that you will not use 9 fonts in particular. We have a couple of new handouts specific to this video. We are still working through that workbook and the progress tracker associated with Module 4. That visual identity resource list is going to reemerge with lots of different tools specific to colors and fonts. And then I'm bringing forward a brand new one called The Psychology of Color. It's meant to be a reference for you as you begin to build the color palette for your brand. So there is actually an institute which does nothing but research colors, believe it or not, and here's what they had to say. Research reveals that all human beings make an unconscious judgment about a person, environment, or item within 90 seconds of initial viewing, and between 62 and 90% of that assessment is based on color alone. Which means within 90 seconds, people are going to make a final determination about our brand. I actually think that time frame is a little bit long. I think it happens faster when we're talking about websites and products in a retail environment. But even if we give a full 90 seconds, 62 to 90% of the overall impression is based on color alone. Color is powerful, and I think sometimes we don't give it enough attention. So we're going to play a little game called Whose Color Is That? I'm going to show you a color, and I want you to tell me which brand you think it belongs to. So how about this? Robin's Egg Blue. Pretty famous, huh? That is, of course, Tiffany. That's an easy one to get us started. How about this one? Think transportation and brown. What comes to mind? I hope it was UPS. And when we think about retail, or retail store with red as their predominant color, what do you think of? Probably Target. And then we've got another retail store. This one's sort of a different genre, and orange is super predominant in their palette. Did you guess Home Depot? Up next, this is a outdoor company. An equipment company that's been around for a very long time, and this bright green is their predominant color. It's often paired with yellow as well. A little trickier, but that one is John Deere. I bet you'll get this one. Think coffee. Whose JD Green is that coffee? That is Starbucks. It is fascinating to me how much we can recall about a brand simply by identifying a color. What's really cool is that these days, with the new rebrand that we have for Lucky Break, people send me things all the time. Gold geometric shapes that they see in Target or in West Elm. People cue me in and say, this reminds me of Lucky Break. I had someone send me flatware, gold flatware with hexagons on it that reminded them of Lucky Break. And not long ago, I was teaching at a live event and somebody said to me, you even came dressed in your brand colors, and it happened to be in black and emerald that day. So it's astounding to me how much this visual identity can really carry us and become associated with our brands. So let's turn our attention to building a color palette for your specific brand. Thinking about how color works. In the sequence of visual perception, the brain reads color after it registers a shape, but before it reads content. So the brain registers a shape, reads the color, and then actually reads the content. So this color recognition happens pretty quickly in the brain. It has been scientifically proven that color creates emotion, triggers memory, and gives sensation. It is incredibly powerful, powerful beyond the recognition that most of us give it. All color is actually relative, and people can have strong and often subconscious prejudices against certain colors and color schemes. I like to think that really no color is bad, but color combinations can be dreadful. And even in the best of scenarios, it's hard to overcome an innate psychological reaction to a specific hue. Any color is good, I believe, so long as you are consistent. When we talk about building a color palette, it's not just going to be green and red and gold and black. It's going to be the exact green, the exact red, the exact gold, and the exact black. These slight variations create distrust. They break the story. So you are going to pick a few shades and then you are going to articulate them with radical consistency. And as I said earlier, I think there are no ugly colors, though there are some pretty hideous color combinations. We want to make sure that we steer clear of those. The fact is that consistently linking your brand to a color increases brand recognition radically. It shoots the data through the roof. So I want you to choose a palette that is distinctive, one that's going to facilitate brand recognition and recall for you. I also need you to choose a palette that is different than your competitors. Remember, we're trying to create differentiation from those peeps as much as possible. So there is a lot of black and white happening right now, and that's awesome. But if everyone else is zigging, I'd start zagging. We also want to choose a palette that's appropriate for your business. We want to make sure that it's suitable. And I want you to think very carefully about what you want your brand to communicate. And then you're going to choose colors very intentionally. I have a handout associated with this module designed to help you do just that. At the end of the day, you're going to select between 3 to 7 colors, and 1 or 2 of those colors are going to be dominant. I don't ever recommend stretching beyond 7 colors in the palette total. So on your screen are quick snapshots of the Lucky Break color palette, which you saw earlier, and you'll see that the green and the gold are predominant. In the bottom right corner, that's Rebels and Reverie, the perfume brand that we've been playing with all semester. Black and white dominant, and then we have 5 different fragrances, so you'll see those 5 primary colors beneath the black and white. When you are thinking about your existing color palette, I want you to ask yourself these questions. Can you pinpoint the exact PMS, RGB, and CMYK color values to ensure that the colors can be consistently produced across mediums? And I'm going to tell you more about those color systems in a few minutes, but it's important that you know those exact values. Does your dominant brand color play well with white? It's going to be printed on a lot of white things. It's probably going to appear on white digital backgrounds and screens. We want to make sure that it plays well with white. What background colors are possible with this palette? That's really important. You have to sort of drop this palette down into context. You can't build it in a vacuum. So what background colors are possible with a palette? And is your dominant color in use by your competitors? It certainly may appear somewhere in their palette, but we don't want to be using the exact hue that is dominant in our brand, also if it's dominant in another brand that is close in our dance space. Also, I want you to think about the psychological connotations that are associated with your palette, and are they appropriate for your brand? As I mentioned a few moments ago, I created an entire handout designed to unpack the psychology behind color use. It's called, not surprisingly, The Psychology of Color. It's waiting for you right now in the virtual classroom. I also want you to think about the primary color and the effect that it will have on the eyes. If it's going to be fatiguing on the eyes, how are you going to moderate its use? So neons, for example, are very fatiguing on the eyes. Red and white, when used in combination on digital screens, your eye just can't withstand a lot of that. So we want to make sure that we're sensitive to that. Does the palette increase the merchandising flexibility and product identification out in the real world? So for example, Lucky Break's done a good job with that because people send me links or snapshots all the time of them being in stores and saying, this so reminds me of your brand. That's what we're striving for here. If you're going to be selling extensively in an overseas market, which some of you might, you want to carefully research the cultural meanings of colors in your palette. They may have very different meanings overseas than what they have here in the United States. That cultural nuance is very, very important. Also, I want to make sure that you do not simply pick your favorite colors. That's what I did for Bella Luce when I first started. It's very easy to fall into that trap, but this isn't really about what you find as a favorite. I want your final palette to be pleasing to you, certainly, so it shouldn't be anything that you find repulsive. But rather than just picking your favorite colors, I need you to meditate on what the colors you select will mean to your audience. That is of primary importance, and then your personal attraction to them is a pretty distant second in my book. Sorry, Charlie. So let's look at Lucky Break's color palette. The predominant color is that emerald green, and the psychological connotations are money, growth, success, balance, calming, trust, and honesty. That's what green innately stands for. Those aren't words that I ascribe to the color. That's what the color research says. And again, all of that data is encompassed, encapsulated, if you will, on the Psychology of Color handout. Our other big color that you see an awful lot of is purple. Purple stands for luxury, wisdom, wealth, sophistication, bravery, and imagination. And then we have our fun pops of gold foil at Lucky Break. Gold foil stands for success, wealth, enlightenment. It elevates the brand and it serves to really grab attention. So look at the colors on your screen, but more importantly, look at the words. And think about what I, as a consulting company, teaching business skills, need to communicate to women creative entrepreneurs. I need to show them that I have been successful. I need to make them think about growth. I want them to be calm because business can be anxiety-ridden, to say the least. I'm trying to build trust and honesty with these people. I love that the purple brings in the psychological connotations of wisdom and luxury and imagination, and then that gold foil reinforces that wealth and success angle and allows me to create printed materials that are particularly eye-catching. I love a good swatch of gold foil. So again, this is how our color palette builds out. We do have some blues and some blacks, but you see them less in our brand. They're pretty present, some of those blues and the watercolors, but we rarely pull them forward in a big way, so there's definitely some nuance here. I want to talk really briefly about the 4 types of color systems, and this information can be particularly technical, so hang in there with me. I'm going to give you a nice unpacking of the data, and then I'm going to try and distill it down so that it's not so confusing. So we want to think about how we can render your colors consistently across different platforms. And there have been different color systems that have been built to ensure that that is possible. There are 4 types: RGB, which is used for digital screens and devices; HEX, H-E-X, also used for digital screens and devices; CMYK, which is often used for printed materials; and then PMS, which stands for Pantone Matching System, and it's used to color match anything on Earth to its RGB or CMYK equivalents. Let's break those down one by one. And again, I know this is technical, so hang with me. I'm going to try and distill it down to its essence. RGB stands for red, green, blue. It is used exclusively in digital or web design. So any work that is designed to be seen on computer screens, televisions, and mobile devices will be in RGB values. It mixes red, green, and blue to create different hues. Due to the variations on your monitors and screens, colors expressed as RGB may vary from one screen to the next. You can recognize an RGB color value because it literally says RGB, and it's followed by a few digits of numbers. So you'll see it like R274, That means the red value is 274, the green value, the G, is 139, and then the B is 198. Next up, we have hex values. So again, this is very similar to that RGB system. It's meant to be displayed on digital work, so computer screens, televisions, and mobile devices. It too mixes red, green, and blue hues to create the different colors. Due to monitor and screen variations, the colors expressed as RGB and hex may vary from one screen to another. Now here's the difference. The RGB was R, a number, G, a number, and B, followed by a number. Hex values are often presented as a pound sign and then a 6-digit code. The first 2 digits represent the amount of red, the second 2 represent the amount of green, and the third 2 represent the amount of blue, so that you get the perfect mix in there. This functions again exactly like RGB, but some developers and programming languages often prefer hex over RGB. So if you've got one, you can calculate the other, but it's important that you have either the RGB or the hex value for each color within your brand. The other color system that I want to focus on next is CMYK, and it is used for print design. CMYK is best for full color and multicolor print jobs. So we have moved off the digital screen and now we're talking about actual printed materials. It's used for digital and offset printing alike. It is often called 4-color or process color because it mixes cyan, magenta, yellow, and black inks to create different hues. So think of this like your printer cartridges. If you pop open the hood on your printer, you may see a little device in there that literally has blue, pink, yellow, and black ink inside. That's CMYK. Because the ink is mixed during the printing process, printing one color on top of another, slight variation in color is possible. Other things that affect the color outcome are the paper or the stock color, the texture and the weight of that paper, and the quality of the ink and the printer which is actually used to print. Some colors are not able to be printed in CMYK values. Things like metallics and neons or fluorescent colors, some shades of navy and gray really cannot be rendered in CMYK formats. You will know that you are looking at a CMYK value when it looks like this. C plus a number, M plus a number, Y plus a number, and then B plus a number. That gives you the mix, if you will, of color values. One more color system and then we will move on. It's PMS, the Pantone Matching System, not the grumpiest week of the month. This is used for print design. It's really best for logos and brand elements because it's the most consistent color value. It is also used in digital, offset, and specialty printing, and by specialty, I mean things like letterpress. It is often called spot printing, and different colors and the designs are printed one color at a time. They're not laid over each other like CMYK was. This is literally one color at a time. It makes the printing process more accurate, but it also makes it more timely and more expensive. You want to use a physical color wheel deck for consistent color production when working in PMS color values. And PMS colors are best to use when the color accuracy is of primary importance. Also, you want to use Pantone Matching System anytime you're working with those tricky neons or the metallic colors too. You'll know you're looking at a Pantone number when it looks like PMS followed by a few digits, a few numerals. So what do you actually need at the end of the day? It depends on what you're doing with the color. Ideally, I want you to have either RGB or hex values. You will need one of those for your website. And then you need the CMYK for all of your printing needs. That's what I would recommend at a minimum with either an RGB or hex. and a CMYK, then you can handle web design and the majority, if not all, of your printing needs. If you have one value, RGB or CMYK, you can actually convert it with Illustrator or InDesign, which are software platforms. It's design software. Or you can use an online website, and I've linked some of those for you in this week's resource list. Note that some RGB values, particularly the neons and the brights, don't convert well to CMYK, and they will not print as intensely as RGB colors. If you are going to be working with letterpress printing, or if you're going to be printing neons and metallics as part of your brand colors, then you're going to need to know those PMS values as well. That is enough technical information at the moment. I know your brain may feel a little bit scrambled. Shake it off and double down. I want to turn your attention to fonts. These can be so much fun. So when you are working with your fonts, I want you to select a maximum of 3 to represent your brand. Less is really more. We're looking for one font, which is reserved for headlines, and one that must be deliciously legible, because it's what we're going to use for big blocks of text on your website and on your printed materials. Be careful to choose fonts which reflect the feelings that your brand is ultimately designed to elicit. And when you are making a choice over style or legibility, legibility always comes first. So we want to make sure that this is very easy to read. If we can also make it pretty, that is awesome, but communicating your message is paramount. I want you to ensure that the fonts aren't on the curve of a fad. So there's always a couple of fonts that are popular in the moment. If you select those because everyone is doing them and you love them too, that's awesome. But know that when they crest, and they always crest, and they're on the downhill slide, your brand is going to look dated. So I recommend going with things that are a little bit more classic, a little bit less trendy. Make certain that the fonts that you choose render well in a variety of type sizes, including teeny tiny. So the same way that I wanted you to take your logo and make sure that it can shrink, I want to make sure that your fonts can shrink and still be legible too. We need to make sure that the fonts could render well in both black and white. Most do, but it is definitely worth checking. And please, if there is a very distinctive font in use by your competitor, you need to steer clear of it. I see some mimicry going on out there, and it really doesn't benefit either of the brands. So there are 6 types of typography or fonts that I want to unpack with you. This is a serif font. You see it there in the word lucky. Serifs are those little lines that finish off the edges of the letter. You'll see them. They're the horizontal lines at the top and bottom of that L in lucky, and then you see them repeated throughout the word. Serifs are used to guide the horizontal flow of the eye and increase quick recognition of letters. They cause less eye fatigue when read. It doesn't matter if you're doing short, punchy paragraphs, but if you were writing a book, for example, most books have a serif font. Serif fonts are easier to read in print. They add elegance and a little bit of traditionalism as well. We can contrast that serif font with its counterpoint, which is a sans serif font. Sans serif fonts, you'll notice, don't have those petite little finishing lines. The word lucky on your screen in the right-hand box is rendered in a sans serif font. Sans serifs are easiest on the eyes in reading situations when the words are rendered in lower resolutions, like a digital screen. They're also easier to read when rendered in smaller type sizes. They just shrink a little bit better. Sans serif fonts are believed to be more clean and modern. That's the way they feel to your reader. So serif gives you the elegance and the traditionalism. Sans serif gives you clean and modern. What would be fun is if you scouted around the internet for a few of your favorite brands this week to see which font style they're using. You will need to pick one of these two styles and use it consistently for all of your body text. Your long product descriptions, everything on your About page is going to be in one of these two fonts. There is no right or wrong, but they do give different feels, and I trust that you will make the best decision for your brand. Then there are script fonts. You'll notice the Lucky has changed now. Script fonts typically look like cursive writing with a stylized but consistent aesthetic. They bring personality and character to a brand identity. I want you to use them very sparingly for the biggest impact because these can be challenging to read in small sizes, and if you use them everywhere, they lose their punch. So very sparingly on a script, but a well-chosen script, well-placed, is a thing of beauty. Then we've got headline fonts. This font adds character and dimension to your brand, but it must be used sparingly. These are literally going to be used as a headline on sales pages and printed materials. Be careful not to select the trendiest iteration, and that will help keep the identity from feeling dated. So again, I want you to pick one serif or sans serif. You're probably going to throw in one script, and then we need one headline font. Other options or elements that you might add, you would probably be subbing out a script for one of these options. But what's really popular right now is these handwriting styles. They literally look like handwriting, and they add a fresh energy and personality to a brand. They can be purchased as a stock script, which is less expensive than using hand lettering, which is literally created letter by letter for you. But again, the same way that we want to be very sparing in our use of scripts, we want to be very sparing in our use of handwriting fonts as well. If you want to go all out, you can get hand lettering done. This is more expensive because, again, custom created especially for your brand. But it is very popular right now. There are lots of different styles and some amazing hand lettering artists out there. They are not overly trendy because they are always customized to your brand. They are expensive, but what's great is they are incredibly distinctive. I want to talk very briefly about bad fonts in action because some of these suckers I see everywhere. Can we all just agree that Comic Sans is tired? It is a hell no. So is Papyrus, for that matter. We should put that one to bed. Jokerman is unforgivable, even for a children's brand at this point. Curls need to be put out of their misery. Brush Script is terribly tired. And that beautiful Bombshell font, it is gorgeous, I agree, but the problem is everyone already did this one. It's a great example of a font that is on the curve of a fad. So these are the 9 fonts that make my top no-no list. No more Comic Sans because it is just cartoony, it's unsophisticated, and it's overdone. Times New Roman is very classic, but it's everywhere. There's nothing distinctive about it. Every newspaper in the country is publishing in Times New Roman. Arial, it's a lovely font. It's a really nice sans serif, but again, hello vanilla. Papyrus is done and dusted. It is so incredibly tired. Joker is super juvenile. It doesn't scale well. It's just been done too many times. Ditto that for Brush Script. The Curls font, Curls with a Z. You know, any font that uses a Z instead of an S is not a good gamble at this point. Vivaldi is in use by every classic Italian restaurant in the United States. You don't want to be associated with that, as much as we love Italian food. And Bradley Hand is also incredibly overdone. If your font is on that list, I want you to change it while you are in Brickhouse Branding. It's a pretty easy switch. Let's make it happen. I'm going to return you once more to the Visual Identity resource list. There are tons of tools on that list, including different color checkers, lots of resources for new fonts for you to discover, even a reversed font lookup where you can trace back a font that you saw on the internet and have it identified. Also, I promised you the Psychology of Color handout. It's designed to infuse the process of building your color palette with strategy and intention. Here's how you're going to put it into action. This is a comprehensive guide which details the psychology of color, including traditional associations, both positive and negative psychological connotations, cultural associations, and some handy usage notes for you as well. Print a copy. Tuck it into your mighty Brickhouse branding binder and then reference it as you build out the palette for your brand. That's everything that you need to know about colors and fonts, and it's also what you need to know to create your core brand identity, everything that's going to be on that visual style guide. Now I'm going to turn my attention to product photography, which is one of my favorite subjects. It's something I'm really passionate about. Creating quality images will really elevate your brand. I'm excited to explore some of that with you. I'm Leila Barker for Lucky Break Consulting. You are doing beautifully here in Module 4. I encourage you to dig your heels in and keep working. We are almost there. I'll see you in the next video.